They had been married for 11 years. 11 years of shared routines, Sunday morning pancakes, Netflix nights on their oversized gray couch, and polite smiles at neighborhood barbecues when people casually asked the same question. "So, do you have kids yet?" Melissa usually laughed it off. Daniel usually answered for both of them. "Not yet. Maybe someday." But someday had been quietly slipping away. The truth was, they had tried. For years. Doctor visits. Hormone treatments. Awkward silences in sterile clinics. Hopeful months that ended in disappointment. Eventually, the trying stopped, not because they didn't want a child, but because the heartbreak was becoming too heavy to carry. They never talked about it openly, but something invisible had settled between them. Not anger. Not resentment. Just emptiness. Their marriage didn't crumble. It softened. Became careful. Predictable. Safe. Too safe. One rainy Thursday evening, Melissa sat alone in the sitting room, scrolling through her phone while the city lights outside blurred behind the rain-streaked windows. Daniel was still working late, his voice faintly audible through the office door as he spoke on a conference call. Melissa stopped scrolling. She stared at a photo on her screen. A smiling little girl, maybe 5 years old, with curly hair tied into uneven pigtails and eyes far too serious for her age. The caption read, "Waiting for a forever home." Melissa's chest tightened. She didn't know why that photo affected her so deeply. Maybe it was the eyes. Maybe it was the thought that somewhere, in the same city, a child was going to sleep without knowing where she truly belonged. When Daniel finally stepped into the sitting room later that night, loosening his tie and rubbing his neck, Melissa was still sitting in the same spot. "You okay?" he asked. She hesitated. "I saw something today," she said quietly. Daniel sat beside her, the familiar space between them barely noticeable but very real. "What kind of something?" Melissa turned her phone toward him. "Adoption." Daniel stiffened, just slightly. "I've been thinking," she continued, her voice careful, maybe this is our sign. Maybe we don't need to keep waiting for what hasn't worked." The room fell silent. Outside, a car passed, its headlights briefly illuminating the walls. Daniel leaned back, folding his hands. "This is a big step." "I know," Melissa said quickly. "I'm not saying we rush. I feel like we still have love with nowhere to go." Daniel didn't answer immediately. He looked around the sitting room, the clean furniture, the framed photos of vacations, the neatly arranged life they had built. Everything was in its place. Too much in its place. "We should think about it," he finally said. Melissa smiled, relief flooding her face. "That's all I'm asking." Over the next few weeks, thinking about it turned into late-night conversations, quiet research sessions, and visits to adoption agencies downtown. They drove through busy city streets, past glass buildings and coffee shops, talking about what kind of parents they would be. Melissa imagined bedtime stories and messy art projects. Daniel imagined stability, schedules, and doing things right. They told themselves they were ready. At the agency, they met social workers who smiled professionally and explained processes, timelines, and expectations. They saw photos. Heard stories. Some too painful to absorb. Then they met Lena. She was 6 years old. Small for her age. Brown skin. Big eyes that watched everything closely. She sat alone in the playroom, lining up toy cars instead of playing with dolls. When Melissa knelt in front of her, Lena didn't smile. She didn't frown either. She just watched. "Hi," Melissa said softly. "That's a cool car." Lena nodded once. "It's red." Daniel stood a few steps back, unsure of where to place himself. When Lena finally looked up at him, something unreadable passed through her expression. Not fear. Not excitement. Something older. Later, the social worker explained that Lena had been moved between foster homes 3 times. Her file was thick. Too thick for a child her age. She's quiet, the woman said. Observant. Very attached once she trusts, but trust takes time. Melissa's heart clenched. Daniel nodded, logical and composed. We understand. They signed papers they barely remembered reading. They told friends. They told neighbors. Everyone congratulated them. The day Lena came home, the sitting room looked different. Toys were neatly arranged. A small backpack rested near the couch. Melissa had decorated a corner with soft pillows and a tiny shelf of children's books. Lena stood at the doorway, clutching her bag. This is your home, Melissa said warmly. Lena didn't reply. She stepped inside slowly, eyes scanning every detail, the walls, the ceiling, the furniture, the people. Daniel closed the door behind them. And in that quiet moment, none of them realized something crucial. They hadn't just brought a child into their home. They had brought in a past. Unspoken wounds. And truths that would test everything they thought was solid. That night, as Lena lay awake in her new bedroom, staring at a ceiling she didn't recognize, Melissa whispered to Daniel from their bed. I think everything is going to be okay. Daniel stared at the dark, listening to unfamiliar footsteps moving softly down the hallway. He wanted to believe her. But somewhere deep inside, a quiet unease had already begun to grow. The first few weeks felt like a performance. Melissa woke up early every morning, determined to be the kind of mother she had always imagined herself to be. She packed lunches with careful precision, cutting sandwiches into neat triangles, slipping encouraging notes into Lena's lunchbox even though Lena couldn't read cursive yet. Daniel adjusted his work schedule, moving meetings around so he could be home when Lena returned from school. He installed safety locks, set up parental controls, and memorized the school's pickup routine down to the minute. From the outside, it looked like progress. Inside the house, something else was happening. Lena barely spoke. She followed rules too well, never touching what wasn't offered, never asking for more, never making a mess. She ate quietly, slept lightly, and flinched whenever a door closed too loudly. At night, Melissa would sit on the edge of Lena's bed, reading softly while Lena stared at the wall. Did you like the story? Melissa asked one evening. Lena shrugged. It's okay. Anything you want to talk about? Lena shook her head. Melissa smiled anyway, though it hurt. Down the hall, Daniel watched these moments with mixed emotions. He told himself patience was the answer. Structure. Time. But time didn't soften Lena. It sharpened her. Small things began to stand out. Lena always watched Daniel when he entered a room. Always. Her eyes tracked him carefully, as if memorizing his movements. Once, Melissa found Lena standing silently in the doorway of Daniel's home office. Sweetie, she asked. What are you doing? Lena didn't jump. Didn't blink. Just looking, she said. At school, teachers praised Lena for being obedient but mentioned she rarely interacted with other children. She's distant, one teacher said gently during a conference. Almost like she's waiting for something to go wrong. Melissa laughed it off. She's been through a lot, she said. We're giving her time. But late at night, when the house was quiet and the city outside hummed faintly, Melissa began to notice the distance between herself and Daniel growing wider. They talked less. Touched less. When they did talk, it was about Lena, what she ate, how she behaved, what she didn't say. Daniel became stricter. Rules make kids feel safe, he said when Melissa suggested letting Lena stay up late once. She's 6, Melissa replied. Not a project. Daniel frowned. I'm just trying to do this right. Melissa didn't argue, but something about his tone unsettled her. One evening, Melissa heard crying. Soft. Broken. Coming from Lena's room. She rushed in, heart racing. Lena was sitting upright in bed, trembling. I had a bad dream, Lena whispered. Melissa pulled her into a hug without thinking. Lena froze. Her body went stiff, breath shallow, eyes wide, like a trapped animal. I'm sorry, Melissa said quickly, pulling back. I didn't mean to. After a moment, Lena relaxed. It's okay, she said quietly. I'm used to it. Used to it. Melissa stayed awake long after Lena fell asleep, staring at the ceiling. She didn't tell Daniel about that part. Days later, something small, but unsettling, happened. Daniel raised his voice. It wasn't shouting. Just frustration. A sharp tone after Lena spilled juice on the carpet. Lena dropped to the floor. Not tripped. Dropped. Hands over her head. Shoulders shaking. I'm sorry, she cried. I'm sorry, I'll clean it, please don't. Daniel froze. Melissa ran in, pulling Lena into her arms, glaring at Daniel. I didn't touch her, Daniel said, stunned. I know, Melissa replied. But look at her. Lena wouldn't look at either of them. That night, Daniel sat alone in the sitting room, staring at the dark TV screen. The house felt different now. Heavy. He replayed the moment over and over. Her fear hadn't been about the juice. It had been about him. Meanwhile, Melissa began noticing things she couldn't explain. Lena avoided being alone with Daniel. If Melissa stepped out of the room, Lena followed her. If Daniel offered to help with homework, Lena tensed. One afternoon, Melissa asked gently, did something happen with Daddy? Lena shook her head too fast. No. Are you scared of him? Lena whispered, not scared. Just, careful. That word echoed. Careful. As if she had learned the cost of not being careful. Melissa tried to talk to Daniel, but every conversation turned defensive. She needs discipline, he said. You're coddling her. She's traumatized, Melissa snapped. She needs warmth. Daniel slammed his hand on the kitchen counter. Lena, standing in the hallway, went pale. From that moment on, she barely spoke at all. Then came the incident that changed everything. One Saturday afternoon, Melissa returned from the grocery store to find the house eerily quiet. Daniel's car was gone. Lena's backpack sat on the couch. Lena? Melissa called. No answer. Her heart pounded. She found Lena in the bathroom, sitting on the floor, hugging her knees. What happened? Melissa whispered. Lena's voice trembled. I broke a plate. Melissa exhaled in relief. That's okay, baby. Plates can be replaced. Lena looked up, eyes full of fear. He said I had to sit and think. Melissa's stomach dropped. Who said? Lena hesitated. Daniel. Melissa's hands clenched. When Daniel returned later, the argument exploded. You locked a traumatized child in a bathroom? Melissa shouted. I told her to sit there, Daniel said sharply. I didn't lock her in. You're exaggerating. She was terrified. She needs consequences. That night, they slept on opposite sides of the bed. And for the first time in 11 years, Melissa wondered if she had made a terrible mistake, not in adopting Lena, but in the man she thought she knew. In her room, Lena listened through the wall, small fingers pressed to her ears. She had seen this before. Homes that looked safe. Adults who smiled at first. Love that came with rules. And she knew, deep down, that this place, too, was starting to break. The house stopped feeling like a home. Silence filled the rooms now, not the peaceful kind, but the kind that made every footstep sound too loud, every breath too noticeable. The sitting room, once warm and inviting, felt staged. Like a place meant to look happy, not actually be happy. Melissa watched Lena more closely than ever. The child barely spoke. She moved through the house like a shadow, careful not to disturb anything, careful not to upset anyone, especially Daniel. And Daniel noticed. He noticed the way Lena flinched when he entered a room. The way she clung to Melissa. The way her eyes followed him with quiet suspicion. It made something ugly rise inside him. "I'm not a monster," he snapped one evening after Melissa asked him, gently, to give Lena more space. "I never said you were," Melissa replied. "But you're thinking it." She didn't deny it. That night, Melissa couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., she heard soft movement in the hallway. Slow footsteps. Barely a sound. She slipped out of bed. Lena was standing in front of Daniel's office door. Just standing there. "Lena?" Melissa whispered. Lena jumped, eyes wide. I thought I heard something." Melissa crouched in front of her. "You don't have to be afraid." Lena's lips trembled. "I'm not afraid of you," she whispered. Melissa's chest tightened. "What about Daniel?" Lena looked away. That was answer enough. The next morning, Melissa called the adoption agency. She didn't accuse. She didn't exaggerate. She just asked questions. The social worker hesitated. "There are some details in Lena's file that we usually don't share unless necessary," she said carefully. Melissa's heart pounded. Necessary for what? For safety. That afternoon, Melissa sat alone in her car in a parking lot downtown, phone pressed to her ear as the rest of Lena's history was quietly revealed. Her previous foster placement. The reason it ended. The man in that house. A man who looked calm. Responsible. Strict. A man who believed fear was discipline. Melissa felt sick. When she got home, Daniel was in the sitting room, laptop open, expression tense. "We need to talk," she said. Daniel sighed. "About what now?" "About everything." She told him what she'd learned. The room seemed to shrink as she spoke. Daniel laughed once. Sharp. Defensive. "So now you think I'm like him?" "I think Lena does," Melissa replied. "And that matters." "She's projecting," Daniel snapped. "You're letting her past poison our family." "Our family?" Melissa repeated quietly. "Or your control." Daniel stood up. "You're choosing her over me." Melissa didn't hesitate. "I'm choosing what's right." That was the moment something broke. Days later, the school called. Lena had panicked during a fire drill, curling into herself, screaming, unable to breathe. When Melissa arrived, Lena clung to her like she was drowning. "It's okay," Melissa whispered, holding her tightly. Lena sobbed. "I thought I was in trouble." That night, Melissa packed a bag. Just one. She sat across from Daniel at the kitchen table, exhaustion lining her face. "I'm taking Lena to my sister's for a while," she said. "For a while?" Daniel scoffed. "Or forever?" "I don't know," Melissa admitted. "But she can't heal here. And neither can I. You're destroying everything we built." Melissa looked around the house, the perfect furniture, the polished surfaces, the life that had looked complete but had been hollow all along. "No," she said softly. "I'm finally seeing it clearly. Lena stood in the hallway, holding her backpack. Daniel looked at her. For a brief second, something flickered in his eyes. Regret. Fear. Or maybe just loss of control. "Goodbye, Lena," he said stiffly. Lena didn't answer. She took Melissa's hand. Months later, the house was sold. The marriage ended quietly, no dramatic fights, no public accusations. Just papers signed and a chapter closed. Melissa and Lena moved into a smaller apartment in the city. The sitting room was modest, the furniture mismatched, but laughter lived there now. Lena started talking more. Smiling. Sleeping through the night. One evening, as they sat on the couch watching cartoons, Lena leaned against Melissa and asked softly, "Am I staying for real?" Melissa hugged her gently. "Yes. For real." For the first time, Lena believed it. And somewhere, in a big empty house in the suburbs, Daniel sat alone, surrounded by the life he thought he wanted, finally realizing that love wasn't about control. And that the child he feared had only exposed what was already broken. This story ends here, but many more are coming. Please subscribe and turn on the notification bell to stay with us.